Here's another video from ProductionGPS.com. Want to take your productions to the next level? Are you pining for that cinematic look? Want to add production value without necessarily breaking the bank? Then you're probably familiar with gimbals. Gimbals are products that stabilize your camera to get that sleek glide look that we're always seeing in high-end Hollywood productions. But on those productions, they have whole teams dedicated to it with different people operating the camera itself, the pan and tilt controls, and then usually a remote focus assistant. But with the Zhiyun Crane V2, you can get real close to that level of quality without having to hire extra people or buy expensive equipment. Here's my review of the Zhiyun Crane V2. Before we begin, this is the Zhiyun Crane V2, a revision on the original Zhiyun Crane, not the Zhiyun Crane 2. The main differences are that this revision supports heavier cameras up to 4 pounds and has a longer battery life. So if you already own a Zhiyun Crane and you're happy with it, you can probably rest easy with your purchase. The Zhiyun Crane 2 supports cameras up to 7 pounds and has a built-in follow focus, which, after using the Zhiyun Crane V2 and having a lot of focus problems, sounds really nice. The Zhiyun Crane V2 costs $399 US at retail as of this posting, $100 less than the Zhiyun Crane 2. It's also $100 less than the iCan Beholder, another popular one-handed gimbal, and $160 less than DJI's flagship one-handed gimbal, the DJI Ronin S. So if you're like me, you opened up your Zhiyun Crane V2 case and thought, what the truck does any of this do? There are about 1 million parts, including a bunch of small screwy things that I've literally never seen before in my life. So here on this video, if you're a beginner, look no further, because I'm gonna make it easy for you. So enough talk, let's go! In the carrying case, there are 4 parts you have to worry about. A big gray screw, a hollow cylinder, batteries, and then the stabilizer itself. My kit also came with a mini tripod too, disguised as another long cylinder. The retail package does not come with this, and I honestly don't know how I could have set this up without it. If you're thinking about buying this and haven't pulled the trigger yet, I would definitely add a mini tripod to your Amazon cart. It's like buying an Apple TV without an HDMI cable. Frustrating and useless. So first, put down your mini tripod on a flat surface. Fill the battery cylinder with batteries and then screw it to the crane itself. Then screw the whole thing into the little tripod. Fantastic! Honestly, most YouTube explainer videos skip this part entirely and I was very lost. From here, you use the big gray screw to screw the camera to the plate. If you're having trouble figuring out which way the camera goes, just look at the text on the gimbal itself. If the text is right side up, you're good to go. And the Chinese lettering should be behind the camera, lens facing away. So after a little screwing, voila! The camera drops like a stone. But this is okay, this is supposed to happen. This is where we balance the camera on the gimbal so that the stabilizing motors don't stress out. A properly stabilized gimbal ensures quiet operation and the advertised 12 hours of battery life. Before we continue, let's go over some terms. Pan, tilt, and roll. Okay, panning means panning left and right, or like shaking your head like this. Panning, panning, and panning. Tilt means tilting up and down, or like nodding your head yes. Yes, yes. And roll means, that's what you do with your head when you see something awkward. Yeah, like that. Okay, now for the balancing. Each axis has its own big gray screw to adjust. They stand out pretty well. There's a screw for each axis, one for the yes axis, one for the no axis, and one for the awkward axis. And balancing is as easy as unscrewing the screw, sliding the arm, seeing how balanced it is, then trying again until you get it. You should also note that there's a black adjustment knob under the camera plate. This is to move the camera back and forth on the plate and is also very necessary. Don't worry if it's not 100%. It should be something like 90 to 95% there at least to ensure efficient, quiet operation. So let's get down to using this baby. So on the crane itself, there are 2 buttons, a joystick, and a slider on the back. The button on the right has a picture of a camera on it and a power symbol. Hold this button for 3 seconds to turn the gimbal on. To turn it off, same thing. Hold it for 3 seconds, it'll flash for 3 seconds, then power down. An even better indicator as to whether you've successfully turned the crane on or off is you'll clearly see your camera get stabilized, like this. Same for turning it off. If you've successfully turned it off, your camera will wilt like a flower. Poor camera. So sad. The mode button switches between modes. We'll get into that in a minute. There's also a joystick D-pad here to control the different axes. And finally, a zoom slider that I did not connect because my Sony lenses don't support electronic zoom. I can't imagine it's a great experience though, especially if the lens is getting longer as you zoom. The Zhiyun Crane V2 has 3 modes: pan following mode, and locking mode. But who the hell can remember that? For this review, we'll be referring to them as Luke mode, R2-D2 mode, and Darth Vader mode, yeah, Star Wars. When you power it up, by default, the gimbal starts in pan following mode. But I call it Luke mode because if Luke Skywalker had his choice of modes, this is the one he'd choose. Because you sort of have to use the Force to get the camera to do what you want, and you can get some very good, straightforward shots with it, just like a hero would get. In this mode, you control the camera up and down with the joystick, and it feels your movement left and right and reacts accordingly. After putting in some time practicing, just like with the Force, you can totally feel it working. It's hard to describe, but you sort of over-tilt the camera in the direction you want it to go. And it goes! Next, there's following mode, or Darth Vader mode. Darth Vader would love this mode because A, it uses the Force just like pan following mode, and B, you have access to roll, which enables some pretty dark filmmaking. In following mode, the Zhiyun Crane feels your movement just like in Luke mode, but you have full control, being able to move both tilt and pan with just a lean of the crane. So freeing, it makes you want to join the dark side. And this also frees up the joystick to control the last remaining axis, the roll axis, which isn't available in any other mode. And using this mode, you can convey some hardcore insanity. Finally, we've got locking mode. This would be R2-D2's favorite mode, much more straightforward, no feeling involved at all. The gimbal just locks the camera in place no matter how you move it. If you want the camera to pan or tilt, you gotta do it with the joystick. This mode works great if you want it to act as a makeshift tripod or if you're just more comfortable with the D-pad. And switching between modes is so intuitive, they included this helpful diagram in the manual. When you need to make a schematic figure just so people can know how to switch modes, maybe there's a better way. I studied this thing, and I still have trouble figuring out their thought process, so my advice is to attempt to follow the schematic at first, then try the joystick. If you can use the joystick to tilt up and down, you're in Luke mode. If you use the joystick to go in any direction, you're in R2-D2 mode. And if the joystick only controls roll, then sir, you've joined the dark side with Vader mode. After spending some time in each mode, I have to say I've joined the dark side, because Darth Vader mode is where it's at. Really, both following modes knock locking mode out of the water. The problem is that the joystick only has 2 states, moving or not moving. You can't move the joystick just a little and expect it to move slower. A tiny push and a hard push both jerk the camera around in exactly the same way, which of course led to some jerky motion. But in each following mode, once you get the hang of it, it's not jerky at all and cleanly glides where you want it to go. So I guess you could say I recommend that you, well, use the Force. Okay, so for all the great things about this product and how stable it makes your shots, you have to make a few concessions. First, make sure you've set up everything you want before turning the gimbal on. When it's on, any pressure you put on the camera is pressure the motors have to fight against, which isn't good for you or the motors, and you risk knocking the camera off balance, causing a need to rebalance, which is annoying. Second, focus is a bitch. There's a reason big budget film crews have a dedicated person for it. You can't adjust it manually because you'll screw up the balance, so you have to rely on autofocus. A dirty word in a lot of film circles. But here, absolutely necessary, and unfortunately for DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, which this is made for, autofocus is often the weakest link. It's an especially big headache on my Sony A7s and A7s II. These cameras are notorious for bad autofocus, and that comes, well, firmly into focus here. The best solution for this is to plan, and make sure you're using the appropriate autofocus mode for the specific scene you're shooting. As with everything else, the Zhiyun Crane V2 comes with an app. And I wish it didn't. It might have more utility for other Zhiyun products, where you use your phone as the monitor and camera, but the app features for this particular product are at best unnecessary and at worst completely broken. There's a gimbal settings screen, which is just plain too far over my head. I can see this being useful, but only in a situation where the gimbal is all screwed up, and so far mine has been working fine. The one screen I thought would be more useful was the control screen, where you can change modes and use an on-screen joystick to control your camera. It was definitely nice to be able to see which mode I'm in. Just using the gimbal on its own can become a guessing game. But that's the end of the screen's utility. Even the joystick lags, so if you can just use the onboard joystick, do it. And this might be a bug, but when using the app to get into following mode, Vader, the physical joystick stops working entirely. Weird. In terms of the competition, I've used a few other gimbals before, like the iCan Beholder for instance, but for $100 less, this fella gives you a ton more battery life and the same great smooth motion you want in a one-handed gimbal. It's also $160 less than the DJI Ronin one-handed gimbal. The only advantage DJI has on their Ronin is a focus ring that you can connect to your camera. And after using the Crane for a little bit, I can see how that can be useful. But for the cheapest product among some great competition, the Zhiyun Crane V2 definitely does not feel like the runner-up. So if you've got a DSLR or mirrorless camera, a relatively light lens, and an autofocus system that doesn't suck, this is the gimbal for you. It definitely has some drawbacks that are inherent in a singular product meant to replace an entire crew's worth of people. But if you're willing to endure some temporary hiccups, drifting shots, fuzzy focus, and mode switch snafus, I would definitely recommend this product.